He poured orange juice all over me and told me I was nothing but a waitress. What he didn't know was that the very next day, the biggest deal of his entire life, a $77 billion deal, would need my signature to close. He learned the hard way that the person you step on going up is often waiting for you at the top. Have you ever been made to feel small? Ever been written off, disrespected, or judged by someone who thought they were better than you? If you have, then you know that fire lights inside. This is the story of how that fire, fueled by one man's staggering arrogance, powered the most critical 24 hours of my professional life. It's a story about dignity, the hidden worth in every single person, and a kind of justice so sweet you can almost taste it. It started like any other Tuesday. I was working at the Gilded Spoon, a ridiculously overpriced restaurant where the air was thick with the smell of seared scallops and quiet money. It wasn't a place for eating. It was a place for performing. People showed off their watches, their partners, and their casual cruelty. For 2 years, I'd been a ghost in this theater. A waitress named Amara Johnson, floating between tables, topping off water glasses, and wearing an invisible smile. Most of them barely saw me. To them, I was just a pair of hands, a uniform, a forgettable part of the scenery. They didn't know I had a master's in strategic finance. They didn't think I spoke 3 languages. They definitely didn't know I was the chief strategy officer for Novacore Technologies, one of the world's fastest-growing tech firms. And they certainly had no idea I was working here, and in other restaurants like it, as part of a deeply personal mission. My dad, who built his business from nothing, used to tell me, "Amara, never forget what the factory floor feels like. Never forget what it's like to be the one serving the coffee, not just drinking it." After he passed, I took his words to heart. So once a year, for 1 month, I'd take a leave from my high-rise office and my world of billion-dollar projections to take a job that came with an apron and a name tag. It was my way of staying grounded, my way of honoring him. It was my insurance against ever becoming one of them, the very people I was serving. But this Tuesday was a grinder. The lunch rush hit like a tidal wave of needy customers and confusing orders. My feet were throbbing, a headache was starting to bloom, and my smile felt less like a mask and more like a crack in a dam. And that's when he walked in. His name, I would soon find out, was Arthur Sterling. He strode into the Gilded Spoon with an aura of entitlement so thick it felt like it had its own gravitational pull. He was flanked by 2 guys in identical slick suits, all of them laughing way too loudly. He didn't even wait to be seated. He just pointed at the best table by the window, a reserved table, and snapped his fingers at the hostess until she, completely flustered, just gave it to him. The second I walked up to his table, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. It was in the way he looked right through me when I introduced myself, the dismissive flick of his hand as he ordered, never looking up from his phone. I've served this guy 100 times before. The kind of man who thinks his net worth gives him a license to treat anyone he sees as beneath him as less than human. Throughout the meal, he was a caricature of an arrogant, wealthy individual. He complained his well-done steak was too dry. He sent back a bottle of wine he called aggressively mediocre, even though it cost more than my month's rent. Each complaint came with a sneer, a little show for his buddies who laughed right on cue. I handled it all with that practiced, robotic professionalism the service industry drills into you. "Yes, sir." "Right away, sir." "My apologies, sir." Each "sir" was another stone I had to swallow. The grand finale came with the check. He glanced at it, scoffed, and tossed his black credit card on the table. When I came back with the slip for him to sign, he was in the middle of a loud story about a yacht party in Monaco. He ignored me, so I just stood there, waiting patiently, a silent fly in his opulent ointment. One of his friends nudged him and nodded toward me. Arthur Sterling stopped his story, and his eyes finally landed on me. It wasn't a look of recognition. It was pure irritation, as if I'd personally derailed his grand narrative. "What?" he snapped. "Your signature, sir," I said softly, holding out the pen. He stared at me for a long, hard second. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He looked at the pen, then at the tall, full glass of orange juice on the table. And then he did something that made the whole restaurant go silent. With a deliberate, theatrical slowness, he picked up the glass. His eyes, full of gleeful contempt, never left mine, and he poured it, the entire glass of cold, sticky orange juice, right down the front of my chest. The liquid shocked my skin, instantly soaking my white uniform. It dripped down my front, onto my pants, and onto the polished floor. A collective gasp went through the room. His friends just stared, their laughter frozen. For one horrible moment, the only sound was the drip, drip, drip of juice from my shirt. My mind went blank. I could feel dozens of eyes on me. Pity, disgust, morbid curiosity. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that felt more scalding than any coffee I'd ever spilled on myself. Then he spoke, his voice dripping with condescension, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oops," he said, without a hint of apology. He set the empty glass down with a soft click. "Maybe that'll teach you to be quicker. Some people just aren't cut out for more. You'll be a waitress forever." He looked me up and down, a look of complete dismissal. He saw my stained uniform, my stunned silence, my identity as a black woman in a service job, and decided that was all I was, worthless, nothing. He scribbled on the receipt, threw the pen down, and stood up. As he and his friends walked out, one of them had the decency to glance back with a flicker of shame, but Arthur Sterling never broke his stride. He left me there, drenched in juice and humiliation. I stood frozen. My manager finally rushed over, not to see if I was okay, but to apologize to the empty air where Arthur had been. He looked at me, at the mess, and his face was all annoyance, not sympathy. He handed me a towel and told me to go clean up. In the cramped staff bathroom, I stared at my reflection. The bright orange stain was like a brand, but it wasn't the stain I was looking at. It was my eyes. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, hard fire I hadn't felt in a very long time. He'd called me worthless. Said I'd be a waitress forever. He judged my entire life based on a name tag. He thought he put me in my place. But as I stood there, scrubbing at the stain that wouldn't come out, I made a silent promise. He had no idea who I was, but he was about to find out. I didn't know how or when, but I knew that Arthur Sterling would see me again. And when he did, he would regret this day. He'd regret the juice, he'd regret the words. The universe has a funny way of balancing its books, and his account was about to come due. The switch from my waitress life to my real life is always jarring, but that night, it felt like jumping between universes. I didn't go home to some tiny apartment. I took a cab to a sleek glass and steel skyscraper in the financial district, a building that seemed to scrape the clouds. A silent elevator whisked me up to the penthouse. My home was the exact opposite of the Gilded Spoon. Minimalist with clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a glittering, panoramic view of the city. No sticky tables, no cracked mirrors, just order and control. I stripped off the humiliating uniform and dropped it straight into the incinerator chute. I stood under a scalding shower for what felt like an hour, washing away not just the orange juice but the feeling of powerlessness that had been clinging to me. As the water streamed over me, the humiliation started to change. It hardened into something else. Focus, fuel. His words echoed in my head. "You'll be a waitress forever." It was the ultimate dismissal, from a man who saw the world as a simple ladder with him at the top. He couldn't imagine the woman serving his juice could be anything more. His lack of imagination was going to be his downfall. I slept for exactly 4 hours, a habit you pick up navigating global markets that never close. When I woke, the city was a tapestry of distant lights. There was no waitress uniform waiting. Instead, I put on a bespoke navy blue power suit, sharp and precise. I styled my hair not to be tucked under a net, but to command a room. The woman in the mirror wasn't the meek waitress from yesterday. This was Amara Johnson, Chief Strategy Officer of Novacor Technologies, and today was the biggest day of my career. For the last 6 months, my team and I had been working nonstop on a landmark deal, codenamed Project Helios. We were about to acquire Helios Energy, a legacy corporation that was floundering, unable to adapt to the new green tech landscape. Helios had the infrastructure and the history. Novacor had the technology and the vision. Together, we'd be a global energy titan. The price tag, a mind-boggling $77 billion. A number so significant it felt unreal. A number that would make headlines and redefine the future of energy. This deal was my baby. I identified the opportunity, developed the strategy, and led the secret negotiations. Today was the final meeting, the day we signed the papers. In my home office, surrounded by screens of market data, I did my final review. My team was the best in the business. We'd spent months on due diligence, meticulously reviewing every financial statement, asset, and liability of Helios Energy. We knew their weaknesses better than they did. We knew where they were losing money, and exactly how much pressure their shareholders were exerting on them. Our offer wasn't just generous, it was a lifeline, and they knew it. As part of our standard prep, we had detailed dossiers on every key person from Helios. You have to know who you're dealing with, their motivations, their pressure points. I pulled up the file for their chief operating officer, the man responsible for their day-to-day operations and a key voice in this deal. And that's when I saw it. The name on the screen practically jumped out at me, Arthur Sterling. I leaned back in my chair, a slow, incredulous smile spreading across my face. It couldn't be. The universe wasn't this poetic. I clicked on his picture. The same arrogant face, the same sneer that haunted me just hours ago, stared back. It was him. The man from the restaurant. The man who poured juice on me and told me my life was a dead end. He was the COO of the company I was about to acquire. A jolt of something electric shot through me. It was a feeling so perfect, so symmetrical, it felt like fate itself had stepped in. The fire that started in that restaurant bathroom was now a raging inferno. This wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. My phone buzzed. My assistant, Chloe. Ms. Johnson, the car is downstairs. The Helios team is confirmed for 9 a.m. sharp. Thank you, Chloe, I said, my voice perfectly calm, betraying nothing of the earthquake that had just happened inside me. I'm on my way. I walked through my silent penthouse as the city below began to wake. I paused at the window, looking down on the world from 50 stories up. Yesterday, he looked down on me from a few inches in a pedestal of pure ego. Today, I'd be looking down on him from a position of absolute power. He had no idea. He was about to walk into the boardroom, expecting to negotiate his company's future and ready for tough questions on finance. He'd be wearing his best suit, his armor of arrogance polished and ready. But he would be completely, utterly unprepared for the woman sitting at the head of the table. The air in the boardroom was still, charged like the moment before a lightning strike. My team from Novacor sat along one side of the massive mahogany table, a line of sharp suits and even sharper minds. At the head of the table, with my back to a panoramic view of the city, I sat waiting. I had arranged the seating myself. I wanted to be the first and last person they saw. At precisely 9 a.m., the boardroom doors swung open. My assistant Chloe announced, the executive team from Helios Energy. Their CEO, a man named Marcus Thorne, entered first, looking weary. He knew his company was on the brink, and this deal was his only escape. His board members followed him, all of them wearing forced smiles, the kind people wear when they're trying to spin a surrender as a partnership. And then, he walked in, Arthur Sterling. He had the same swagger, the same arrogant tilt to his chin. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never been told no, a man who believed he belonged in every room he entered. He was laughing at something a colleague said, a booming, self-important sound that echoed in the vast space. He didn't see me at first. His eyes scanned my team, sizing up the competition. He shook hands with my CFO, offering a dominant grip and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was performing, just as he had at the restaurant. My team, following my earlier instructions, didn't introduce me. They gestured to the empty seats. The Helios team settled in, shuffling papers. Arthur Sterling sat down directly across from me, still fussing with his leather notebook and gold pen, creating his own little fortress of importance. Marcus Thorne cleared his throat. "Good morning," he began, looking directly at me. "We're pleased to be here. I'm Marcus Thorne, CEO of Helios, and this is my COO, Arthur Sterling." As his name was said, Arthur finally looked up. His eyes met mine across the polished mahogany. The moment stretched on forever. I watched his face, and it was like seeing a building collapse in slow motion. First, professional acknowledgement, then confusion, a flicker of familiarity. He knew he'd seen me, but his brain couldn't place me. Servers aren't supposed to show up in $77 billion boardrooms. I just held his gaze, my expression a complete blank. letting the silence do the work. I let him scramble through his memory, through all the faces of influential people he knew, and then I saw it. The click, the sickening wave of recognition. His eyes widened. The blood drained from his face, leaving his skin a pale, waxy gray. His mouth fell slightly open. The arrogant posture went rigid with shock. He remembered. The restaurant. The stained uniform, the cold, sticky juice, and his words. "You'll be a waitress forever." The silence in the room was now deafening. Both teams looked back and forth between us, sensing something massive and unspoken was happening. Marcus Thorne's introduction faltered. He looked at Arthur's face, a mask of pure horror, and then back at me, the picture of calm, absolute control. I let him twist in that silent hell for a full 10 seconds. I wanted him to feel the full weight of it. Finally, I leaned forward slightly. "Good morning, gentlemen," I began, my gaze sweeping over their team before landing like a physical weight back on Arthur Sterling. "I am Amara Johnson, Chief Strategy Officer for NovaCore Technologies. Thank you for coming." I paused, letting my name and title detonate in his mind. I watched the last of his composure crumble. He was no longer a powerful COO. He was a man staring at a ghost he'd tried to humiliate, now sitting in judgment of his entire world. Then I spoke directly to him, my voice laced with a cold civility that was more brutal than any scream. "Mr. Sterling, it's a pleasure to see you again so soon." He flinched. He tried to speak, but just a dry, croaking sound came out. I, he stammered, his eyes darting around for an escape. I gave him none. I leaned in a fraction more, my voice dropping to a near whisper that was just for him, yet felt by everyone. "You do remember me, don't you, Mr. Sterling? Yesterday you were kind enough to share your opinion on my career prospects. You said I'd be a waitress forever." I let the words hang in the air. His face, if possible, got even paler. I straightened up, my voice snapping back to a crisp, professional tone. "Today," I said, my eyes still locked on his, "you will be addressing me as Ms. Johnson." With that, I opened the folder in front of me. "Now shall we begin? We have a $77 billion acquisition to discuss, and I assure you the terms have become significantly less flexible overnight. The game was on, but it wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. What followed wasn't a negotiation. It was a controlled demolition. Our original strategy had been firm but fair. There was room to talk, a little window for the Helios team to salvage some concessions and, more importantly, their pride. That window was now welded shut. As I laid out the revised terms, a chill fell over their side of the table. The $77 billion price was the same, but the deal's structure was gutted. The executive retention packages, replaced with strict clawback clauses. Several divisions they'd hoped to sell off, now mandated to be liquidated to cover debt. And then came the clause I'd had my legal team draft an hour before the meeting. The Executive Redundancy Review. It gave NovaCore sole discretion to terminate any C-suite executive from Helios, post-acquisition, without cause, and without their negotiated severance. Marcus Thorne stared at the term sheet, his face ashen. "Ms. Johnson, this is brutal. This isn't what we discussed. It's a dismantling of our company." "Market conditions have shifted, Mr. Thorne," I replied coolly, my eyes fixed on Arthur Sterling. "Our final analysis revealed deeper risks in Helios's operational structure. The company has been poorly managed, inefficient, arrogant. We are taking a significant gamble, and our terms now reflect that." Every word was a bullet aimed directly at Arthur. As COO, poor management was his failure. He sat there completely broken. The swagger was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading look. He kept trying to meet my eyes to send some silent, pathetic appeal. I refused him even that, looking at him as if he were a piece of furniture about to be sold for scrap. He tried to speak once. "Ms. Johnson, Amara, about yesterday. I was having a bad day. I'm so sorry." I cut him off, not with anger, but with the cold indifference of a surgeon. "Mr. Sterling, your personal anecdotes are irrelevant. We're here to discuss the valuation of your company, not the quality of your character, which I assure you has already been fully assessed and found to be worth nothing." Silence. My own team stared at their notebooks, a mix of awe and terror on their faces. They'd never seen me like this. This was an execution. The Helios team feebly tried to push back. It was pointless. I knew their company better than they did. For every point they raised, I had a data-driven rebuttal that effectively countered it. The humiliation from yesterday had been forged into an unbreakable weapon of logic. After 2 excruciating hours, they caved. It was this or bankruptcy. Marcus Thorne, with a trembling hand, gave his verbal agreement. As the lawyers prepped the final documents, Arthur Sterling made one last desperate attempt, leaning across the table and whispering, "Please, don't do this. My career, my reputation. It's all I have." I finally looked at him, really looked at him. "Your reputation?" I said, my voice dripping with ice. "You defined your reputation the moment you decided a person's worth is based on their job. You poured juice on a woman you thought was a nobody because you could. You thought she was powerless. You weren't just wrong about me, Arthur. You were wrong about the world." I leaned back. "You still have a job for now, but I was hoping you could go home tonight and think about what it feels like to have your entire future in the hands of someone you deemed worthless. I want you to feel that. Let it soak in." The signing was a quiet, somber affair. I signed my name, Amara Johnson, with a steady hand. As soon as I was done, I stood up. "Gentlemen, NovaCore Technologies thanks you for your cooperation." I didn't shake hands. I turned and walked out, leaving them sitting in the ruins of their company. The very next day, NovaCore officially took control. My first act was to call an emergency board meeting. The first item on the agenda, a review of the executive leadership. I presented a devastating, data-backed analysis of the operational failures under the COO's leadership. I didn't have to mention the restaurant. The professional case for his termination was overwhelming. I concluded with a formal motion. I move for the immediate termination of the Chief Operating Officer, Arthur Sterling, for gross operational negligence. The vote was unanimous. He was fired by lunchtime and escorted out by security, given only 1 hour to clear his desk. No golden parachute, no graceful exit. His fall was as swift as his arrogance had been vast. In the weeks that followed, I oversaw the transformation of Helios Energy, turning a dying giant into a modern powerhouse. I never saw or heard from Arthur Sterling again. He became what he tried to make me feel: invisible. Sometimes when I'm working late, looking out at the city, I think about that day. I think about the sting of humiliation, of being rendered worthless by a man's casual cruelty, and I think about the $77 billion lesson he learned. He thought power was about his bank account and his job title. He remembered, way too late, that real value is written in your character. It's about how you treat people, especially those you think have nothing to give you. My father taught me to remember the feel of the factory floor. Arthur Sterling, in his own twisted way, taught me something even more potent. He reminded me that dignity isn't something that is given. It's something that is owned. And sometimes you have to remind the world, one boardroom, one signature, one $77 billion deal at a time, that the person they dismiss today might own their tomorrow. He learned the hard way that you should never, ever underestimate the waitress. She might be the one to buy your company. So what do you think? Would you have been as ruthless, or would you have shown mercy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you believe karma has a way of balancing the books, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where the underestimated rise and the arrogant fall. And remember, treat everyone with respect. You never know who you're talking to.